Okay, so it's 5 past, so maybe we can start again. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's joined this session on digital solutions for social protection responses to COVID-19 on payments. This is one of the first sessions today, part of the conference of turning the COVID-19 crisis into an opportunity. What's next for social protection? This session is hosted by the SPIAC-B Digital Social Protection Working Group. So SPIAC-B, that's Social Protection Interagency Cooperation Board. And in that network of agencies working on social protection, there's one working group specifically looking at digital solutions for social protection. And the second host is SPACE, the Social Protection Approaches to COVID-19 Expert Advice. It's an initiative providing expert advice for countries extending social protection, in particular now during the COVID-19 crisis. And this initiative is funded by the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office and the German Development Corporation. I'm Veronika Wozak. I'm Social Protection Policy Specialist at the Social Protection Department of the International Labour Organization. And would like to welcome you at this session. This is supposed to be a virtual space for learning, interactions, and knowledge sharing. We really would like to encourage all of you to participate actively in this session. We have some resource persons, but the idea is very much that all of you can exchange in peer-to-peer learning through this, what we call clinic, focusing on practical and hands-on questions around providing payment solutions for social protection schemes and programs. This is, of course, a challenge, especially in countries where financial inclusion is weak or where the banking network is weak. Obviously, especially cash transfers are a key part of social protection systems, and providing secure, reliable, accessible mechanisms at reasonable cost to deliver these payments is obviously a very important issue, and has become even more of a challenge in times of COVID-19. Where especially payment mechanisms that still rely on making payments in cash faced additional challenges due to lockdown measures, restrictions of movement and physical distancing regimes, so that systems relying on cash payments really had difficulties to ensuring their continuity of operations. On the other hand, programs and schemes that already had introduced digital payments, and specifically so through various types of mobile phone payments, succeeded in bringing payments closer to the people, and this very often at a reduced cost. So we would like to discuss solutions to countries that still face challenges with their payment systems. This clinic is organized around questions. We've seen that a lot of you have already taken the opportunity to post questions into the chat before this meeting, which is great. So we will move to this Slido question and answer forum in a moment, so that we can jointly read through the questions that have already been posted. You also have the opportunity to add your further questions that you would like to have answered. And then we are also going to, each of us, select one question that you would most like to focus our discussion during this live session on. And then the questions that receive the most votes or the most likes will be discussed during this session. Before we move to the question and answer forum, I would like to invite our resource persons to quickly introduce themselves. So let's go ladies first. Lena, do you quickly want to introduce yourself, please?
Sure, thanks, Veronika. Yeah, I'm Lena Grombach. I'm a researcher with the University of Cape Town, currently doing my PhD on cash transfers and payment systems in sub-Saharan Africa. And I'm also currently a consultant with IPCIG and worked on the COVID response mapping for sub-Saharan Africa. And yeah, excited to be here and looking forward to an interesting discussion.
Great, thank you. So we go bottom up. Joscha, do you want to go next, please?
Yes, of course. I don't know, I cannot start my video, but I will do it like this. I'm Joscha Albert, working for GIZ, German Development Corporation. I'm currently advising the ministry, so the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And I'm not the typical resource person here because I'm actually coming from the field of financial systems development. So really focusing on payments and having a focus on financial inclusion and these objectives. But I'm really looking forward to participate in today's call and to our meeting, and as well to learn a lot on this interface to social protection.
Great, thank you. William, could you kindly introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is William Durban, and I'm a director for the Mobile for Humanitarian Innovation Program at the GSMA. And yes, really excited to be here to learn and also to share. Thank you.
Excellent. And last but not least, Rodrigo, could you kindly introduce yourself?
There, I think now we have the sound. Thank you, Veronica. Good morning, everyone. I'm Rodrigo Assumpção. I'm from Brazil. I've worked many years with the Brazilian government, especially dealing with the IT needs for social security. And now I've joined the ILO working as an MIS specialist. So happy to be here.
Excellent, thank you. We will now kindly move to all of us to this called Slido application, which will allow us to read through the questions that have already been posted. So may I invite all of you, there is also in the chat, if you can access the chat box, or you can click on this link that is on the presentation. It will take you to the Slido application where participants have already posted some questions. Before you post your own question, please make sure that you read through the questions that are already there so that we can avoid duplication. And there are quite a lot of them already there. Just to explain a little bit about how this is going to work. We won't have the time to go through all the questions here. So we are going, you can already see that people already voted on questions as well. So the first top 4 questions already received 4 votes, or the top 5 questions. So if you can only put 1 vote, so you better think carefully about which one you would like to vote for. And don't get disappointed if we don't get a chance and don't have the time to discuss your question live during the live session. All questions will eventually be answered, and we will have a shared open Google document where we will answer all the remaining questions in writing. So we will spend 10 minutes reading through the questions, voting on them, and posting additional questions. And then we go back to the Zoom video interface to go through the discussion and the questions. So I hope this has been clear. If you have any questions, you can mute and unmute your microphone yourself. So please don't be shy. You can also use the chat if you don't have a microphone, or you can ask questions directly. Okay, I'm not sure whether most people have had a chance to go through the questions and exercise their right to vote. Can I get quick feedback? Would people like to spend an additional couple of minutes, or is this fine and we can start getting to your really interesting questions? It's really a pity we don't have more time. I would like to go through most of them, but I guess we won't get to more than 3 to 5 questions. In order to cover as many questions as we can, I would like to ask the interventions to be short and concise. I think 2 to 3 minutes per speaker would be ideal. And then maybe we can have about 3 to 4 speakers per question. Do you think the use of digital payment tools will be sustained beyond the pandemic? That is, will it be used for existing cash-based programs as well? Or is this perhaps already happening in some countries? So I guess the question is, are some of these digital payment tools just used one-off for immediate COVID response measures? And then this will be seized again once we move back into normal waters, although, I mean, we may want to think when that would be, but yes, I guess eventually there will be a new normal. And will we continue with the digital payment tools that were introduced during this COVID situation? Or is this already happening? So I'm giving you a few seconds to think about the questions, and then I will stop sharing my screen so I can see who's raising their hands more easily. And then our resource persons, but all of you are invited to think about this first question about using the newly introduced electronic payment systems during this crisis, also more generally in social protection payments. Who wants to go first and answer what they think about this? I don't see any hands raised, but please, Lena, Rodrigo, Joscha, or William, would you like to take a first stab at this?
Both Lena and Joscha have raised their hand.
Why can't I see this? And William as well now. I can see William now.
We're using the thumbs up, so we're not really using
Okay.
Thumbs
the...
up, yes.
Yeah, so you will see it on
okay.
our videos,
Great.
or our non-existing videos.
Okay, great. Thanks for the explanation. Then Lena, why don't you go first since your mic is already open?
Okay, sure. Yeah, look, I think sorry, I think somebody's sound is on. I think what we were already seeing before COVID was that things like mobile money were becoming more and more prevalent and more popular as a payment instrument in many countries, especially West Africa. But prior to COVID, it was mostly used for kind of the newer programs, more recently launched, some of the smaller programs. It was quite prevalent in humanitarian responses as well. But a lot of the longly established programs, like in South Africa, even in Kenya, where mobile money is really very widespread, we're using bank transfers. So what we've seen with many of the new programs that were launched is that mobile money was used in Sub-Saharan Africa for about 60%, so really the large majority. And personally, I think it's definitely given a boost to the use of that technology. I think it will spill over into existing programs. We've already seen, for example, in Lesotho and Eswatini, partly in Nigeria, that they've switched from predominantly cash to mobile money during the pandemic as part of their response. So I think this is something that we will see over the next few months. Not necessarily everywhere, because, for example, in South Africa, they've been using bank transfers and cash payments for a very long time, and it's a very entrenched system. They were planning to use mobile for the emergency response, but it was ultimately dropped simply because it was easier to use existing systems. So I think for smaller, for newer programs, the adoption will be quicker. It will probably take longer for larger and existing programs, but I do think this has certainly accelerated the adoption of, for example, mobile money. So something that would have probably taken a few years if COVID hadn't happened might now happen within a few months or a much shorter time frame. That's for Sub-Saharan Africa, but I think we can also probably assume that for other regions as well.
Great, thanks. Joscha, you also wanted to chip in?
Yeah, now with video. Yeah, as so often, it really depends. But what we see, for example, in countries like Jordan or Bangladesh, and so the push Lena just talked about can really lead to a situation then after or post-COVID, where this new digital forms of social payments, how they are delivered, will continue. And this is a tricky thing, and where we should all think of and work on is how we can make this system sustainable, and the risks which are definitely involved in switching to digital channels, how we can best address them. And I think just the example from Jordan, where we see, or where we had like 600,000 mobile wallets before COVID. So in March, we are now having a situation where we have a million, I think it's a 1.1 million accounts currently. So almost doubles the size of mobile wallet accounts. And it was because the government relaxed the regulation with regards to mobile wallet opening, with regard to KYC requirements and so on. And I think there was a barrier with regards to the regulation, but the infrastructure was already there. And so in countries where the infrastructure was there and where it works smoothly now with digital payments, I think there's a chance to really make use of the push and to have a sustainable solution for the the times after COVID.
Great, thank you. Rodrigo, you also wanted to come in?
Yes, please. Well, I think after this very fast and very widespread expansion, it will certainly stay beyond whatever crisis, and it will certainly stay beyond the establishment of this new normal, which I totally agree has no time frame whatsoever to come back, if we can talk about going back. But I think what is going to happen is that the digital payments will, the same way that the mobile money, strictly speaking, will approach more and more what we know as a regular bank account. The bank accounts will approach more and more the speed, the agility of digital payments. And then I think what is going to slowly, very slowly, it's a long tail case, trickle out is the cash payments, because the technology brings enormous savings. It brings enormous speed into the process. It brings enormous capacity for everything from auditing to controlling. So the risks, I think, which obviously are present, will not impede this, because the payback, so to speak, the positive aspects will majorly overcome the situation.
Thank you. And finally, William, your take on this?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I think just to echo what my colleagues have said, I work for the GSMA, so we represent the interest of mobile operators. And we have seen an increase in demand for digitization, even from the operator side. Most operators are quite keen to partner with FSPs and also with humanitarian organizations and social protection programs to try and promote, digitization. So if you look at it from a private sector point of view, you can see that I feel that it will be sustainable, because you've got those who are actually driving it on the ground, interested in putting in resources themselves to help and push it forward. We've seen countries in Asia that are offering free cash transfers, of fees, just to encourage the use of digital payments solutions. So yes, COVID has really boosted it, because people were not allowed to touch and stuff like that. So it really boosted the use of digital. But I think it had already started. We had already, even before COVID, we had seen a great push for most organizations, from governments, to try and use digital. And it's very context specific. So, there are more questions that I'm sure we'll come to, but you also have to look at the context where it can actually thrive and be sustainable. So I think it's not just for COVID, I think it's for the long term. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So our experts universally seem to think that there is a big push for digital payments, and this is there to stay. With Rodrigo even assuming that cash will eventually slowly trickle out, and the digital payment solutions will take over to a certain extent. What do other participants think? Would anyone else want to raise a follow-up question or make a comment on this? You can.
I think Richard from Ghana just said in the chat that he would like to make a comment.
Yeah.
Yes, so yeah, you're already unmuted. Yeah. Please, Richard, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, please. Digital, what is it? Transfer of money is actually good and then simple to be used, but its disadvantage, it's very, very painful, especially when you send money and it goes through the wrong hands. It's hard to retrieve them. Anyway, I think of late there are so many ways to retrieve lost funds. but there are other disadvantage as well. Someone will trick you in a simple text message that he transferred an amount of money that locked into your mobile account. So provide this in a tricky way, and you realize you send a money, and later you not hear of what you've sent anymore. So it's good, but I think if we do more, if we look at it more and then put certain measures around it, it will go a long way to boost its importance. Thank you.
Yes, thanks a lot for this, bringing in this warning again. Joscha had also talked about potential risks. The difficulties of retrieving funds once they've been sent, and of course there's also a risk of abuse or fraud. There's no foolproof system, and maybe digital payments to a certain extent make it even easier to carry out such misuses. And then there's two questions further down. There is one that is aiming a little bit at a related point regarding so I would regarding the data collected from beneficiaries receiving digital payments, and what can be done to avoid frauds and errors. So I suggest we jump to the third question in our list. And this is also interesting because it also raises the question of data privacy and data protection standards. And Joscha pointed to this a little bit, saying that some companies have relaxed their regulations regarding the know your customer requirements. So on one hand, in a push to make these digital payments work for more people and more easily in times of the crisis, what are the risks related to this in terms of fraud and errors, in terms of violation of data privacy and data protection standards, and how can we make sure these digital payments are safe and secure, even when scaling them up at a very fast speed. I mean, Joscha was also mentioning this figure for Jordan, where the number of mobile wallet accounts doubled within a few months. And how can companies keep up with this explosion of additional customers and still make sure that their systems run safe and secure? And William raised his hand again, so we'll go back to William first.
Hi. So thanks very much for those questions that Mr. Shan raised. I think that one of the key things that have been coming up in terms of ensuring that customers are protected, it's all in how we register them and what information that we take. And increasingly, we are seeing the innovative use of biometrics, just to make sure that people say they are, people are who they say they are, and that reduces a lot of the risks and the complexities. It's not easy, it's not always cheap to put in place, but I know that in Jordan, for example, they are using iris scan. We've seen areas where they've used voice, sort of use your voice as a biometric, and then also the usual thumbprint. And if we're able to put that into processes, and where they've been able to put that into processes, it sort of helps to reduce the risk. I agree with you that in terms of the KYC or know your customer data, it's sort of a chicken and egg situation. If you put in very high barriers, then a lot of people may not be able to have mobile wallets or have the service. But if you also make it too low, then you have the risk of who is joining. So that's where I think how you get people onto social protection platforms, how you register people, how you get them in there, whether for social protection or for humanitarian needs, is actually quite important. I think there are some questions further down that we might deal with that. But I think that biometrics can help, and we've seen areas where they've helped quite a bit. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I'm sorry, I'm struggling to see who else wants to come in. So just please go ahead. And Rodrigo, I think you want to?
No, I think Lena.
Lena, okay, sorry. Lena, please go ahead.
Yeah, also just a quick comment from my side. I think what we've seen during the emergency response was really this pay now, verify later approach, where it's important to get money out quickly in the context of a pandemic. Hence, we've seen relaxations with regards to KYC and so on and so forth. But of course, the verify later aspect is important. So I think now that we're going into the post-emergency phase, that's really where the verification part also comes in. And where in cases where we've had relaxations, certain documentation or proof would now possibly have to be provided in order to confirm accounts that have been opened and in order to continue with certain programs. What another point is perhaps that in terms of account opening, I mean, to make a quick payment, possibly a once-off payment, you don't even necessarily have to open accounts for every beneficiaries. I mean, we've seen approaches where you don't actually open mobile wallets for beneficiaries, but you simply send a one-time PIN to the person. So all you need for that is the cell phone number, the name, and probably the ID. And then with that code, beneficiaries can go and withdraw their money. Now, obviously, that's not a long-term solution, because obviously, if you have a long program, you want beneficiaries to have an account. But for an emergency response, I think that's a very minimum data collection approach that can be very successful. And in terms of biometrics, yes, it can be helpful. As you said, William, it's quite expensive. And I think for an emergency program, it's probably not as useful, because obviously you have to enroll people first. It requires personal contact. It requires investment in the technology and so on and so forth. So I think for an emergency response where those systems are not already in place, it's probably a bit too much. But on the long run, if you have a large program with the necessary resources, then that can definitely add that extra layer of security.
Great, thank you. Joscha, you had put your thumbs up, or did you put it down again?
Yeah, yeah, thanks a lot, Veronica. I just think it stays for a couple of seconds and then disappears. Yeah, I mean, I just want to echo what the colleagues just said. And I mean, there are these general risks of accessing these services. So we are talking about lack of mobile or having a mobile and mobile coverage, easy access to money agents, for example. I mean, it does not make sense to have a mobile wallet and to receive cash on your mobile wallet if you don't have a chance to really make use of it, to really use it, to pay with it and so on. So you need an access to money agent, and simple questions as if people have access to electricity and things like this. So these are the one side of the risks. But the other ones, I mean, we talked about data. I think this is really important. And I'm really happy that, for example, the colleagues from the humanitarian sector are working currently a lot on how to protect data in this field, because they are dealing with similar issues like we've seen now in the social protection sphere in the times of COVID-19. But what I'm a bit worried about is, I mean, bringing so many people in the system and now using this digital tools, and I think the ones which are least comfortable with this new technology are the ones as well which are most likely to make mistakes, which are vulnerable to fraud and things like this. And in times of social distancing, for example, the question is on how to train these people, how to educate these people on how to making them aware of the risks involved, and making them really being able to use these new technologies, how to use your new mobile wallet, for example. And these are the things I'm a bit worried about, how we can deal with it. And I mean, the financial system, for example, I think this is always important to be reminded of, is built on trust. And if you're coming now with a new technology, you really have to prove that people can trust it. And if this is not there from the beginning, and people are not really trusting it. I think there's this huge risk that in the near future they will not trust it anymore, and that these new systems will never really take up.
Great, thanks a lot. Indeed, I mean, there were a lot of really important things that came up here. I mean, the advantages and disadvantages of using biometric solutions. And thanks, Joscha, also for bringing up this question of how to increase financial literacy, how to train people to adopt new technologies, and how can we do this, especially in COVID times with the restrictions of movements, etc. And as you said, I mean, payment systems, yes, and financial transaction, they rely a lot on trust. And this is also true, of course, for social protection systems to a large extent. I mean, if we now think of emergency solutions and cash transfers, we often think of non-contributory schemes, but especially if you think of social insurance regimes also, where you make payments now, trusting that you will get a benefit later when you need it. This of course is also built on trust, and again, I mean, you will then need to be able to trust that you receive the benefit, and there needs to be a modality behind this for paying. Another thing that Joscha brought up that I think is very interesting is, okay, so you've received your money transfer on a mobile phone, and then you need a money agent, or you need to be able to cash in from your mobile wallet. You need to be able to use that money somewhere, and there need to be sufficient agents, either being able to put this into cash, or shops that accept payments from that technological solution, so that you can then purchase goods and services with that. Otherwise, there's no use in your mobile wallet either, and this of course is important. Okay, we go to the next question that received 6 votes. What are the advantages and disadvantages of using one or multiple providers for the delivery of cash transfers in general and during the pandemic? So this question of how many payment providers you should use and what are the pros and cons of this. And of course, if any of the participants want to come in also on the last question or this one, please don't be shy. You can use the chat, or you can unmute your microphone and speak, or raise your hands. I see Rodrigo wants to answer this question of one or multiple payment providers. Please, Rodrigo, go ahead.
I will get to that, but I have a little a comment on what was discussed before. I think that once we get into all these this expansion, one of the key elements is that the problems with what we're doing come up, and it's only when these problems come up that we are able to solve them. So the boost that was mentioned has actually opened the door for a very large increase in what's called the bankerization of the population, and that opens all kinds of possibilities. In the beginning, yes, there are risks involved. There are people that are excluded. One of the questions in the chat was talking about that. Those who cannot be included. Well, those are getting fewer and fewer, I believe. In a sense, what we're doing is building infrastructure, building data infrastructure, building the knowledge associated to this infrastructure. So you have the infrastructure of biometrical data, you have the infrastructure of bank data, you have the infrastructure of exchanging digital payments, and you have the increase of knowledge and usage of this infrastructure. This always advances the problem, advance not in any qualitative sense, but it moves the problem onwards. And then we can deal with these new aspects of the problems. When we were distributing cash directly, there were huge security issues, and sometimes in many programs, armed guards had to be there to protect the payment, the interface between the payment and the people. And then people could be scammed, could be robbed, could be exploited. There were loan sharks in my country that would keep the cards of people when they had cards, and they would keep them as collateral for the payment. So these risks have always been there in a sense, and they're getting new digital aspects that we then are able to deal with. And the increase in the population reached is what compensates, in a sense, this idea that there are risks involved. I don't really believe these risks are so new. The second part of that question was about blockchain, but I'll keep that for later. Going back to the original one, if you have one very powerful provider, be it a bank, a state bank, or even a mobile provider, sometimes you can have a lot of speed in your deployment. But of course, as the time goes and you're no longer in this emergency phase, you will want to increase the providers through a question of the capacity, the outreach, which is crucial. And then we are going to be coming into a kind of a market situation where if you trust only one provider, you might be in their hands and not the other way around in terms of setting up the pricing, setting up the conditions. But that is very dependent on the case. What is your relationship with the provider? How much you control or do not control their strategy? And what are the market forces involved if you are in a market context? Those would be my takes on that question. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Rodrigo. And Lena, you also had put exactly your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I agree with Rodrigo, both regarding what he mentioned about risk and also that danger of using one provider and then basically being locked in with a certain technology or with a certain provider. So that risk is definitely there. And we've seen that in some cases. In South Africa, for example, a few years ago. An advantage of using several providers in this regard is obviously the competition in a way that it introduces. Also to fill gaps in coverage, because not every provider can obviously reach necessarily every area of the country. So in some cases, even with mobile money, we've seen countries use two providers because one possibly had network gaps in one region. And then once again, when it comes to digital literacy, you could have different technologies. So you can offer mobile money for certain beneficiary groups, but you can offer bank transfers or even cash out options for other beneficiary groups, like possibly pensioners or people receiving disability grants who are not as digitally literate in that sense. But obviously what that then introduces is additional layers of complexity, of administration, of control. And many countries don't necessarily have that internal capacity. So in that case, it might not even be feasible to deal with multiple providers at the same time. And a last point I want to make, I think it's also very important to remember that there are always two sides to this. I mean, there's the government provider side, but there's the beneficiary side as well. And I think often we think from a government or provider side when we talk about the benefits. But for beneficiaries, for example, it would be important to be able to switch between different providers if they are there. So how easy is that to switch from one provider to the next? And once again, to echo what Veronica said earlier, if you're, for example, introducing mobile money, yes, it brings a lot of benefits for governments, for program agencies in terms of traceability, accountability, and safety, so to speak. But if mobile money isn't accepted as a form of payment in that country, then beneficiaries will still go and cash out. So we're not really getting rid of the cash. We're not necessarily getting rid of the queues. Beneficiaries might still have to travel long distances to their closest mobile money agent if the network isn't dense enough. So I think it's very important to keep that in mind. And sometimes we get so excited about mobile money that we forget that, and that ultimately those systems and those considerations also need to be centered on the beneficiary. And we need to ask ourselves the question, does that really benefit the beneficiary, or does it mostly benefit the implementing agency? That just as a comment on the side.
Great, thank you. William, I think you also had raised your hand.
Yeah, just to say that for whether you use multiple providers or one, I think the key thing is to understand the particular context, that you are playing in. And it's just amazing how the different countries have got very, very different, payment ecosystems. And it's important to understand which sort of environment you're operating. Yeah, some of the advantages have been mentioned here. You can get wide coverage if you use multiple areas. I think you can also explore different solutions, for different particular contexts. So in some part of the country, you might want to use mobile money, or in some cases you use cards or bank accounts, but you have that flexibility, and you also give the customer, some amount of choice to choose what, which platform is good. And you can spread the risk a bit. And it also helps partnerships. You can get some of the providers to partner. So it's not, we've seen cases where the bank has partnered with a mobile operator and through their agent network, to get cash across. So that can work quite well. Obviously, some of this disadvantage we mentioned here is just dealing with procurement alone can be a nightmare. Procuring one provider can be a challenge. So procuring more than one, you've got the complexity of that. And dealing with different processes is also a big challenge. But I think that one of the things that we really encourage is, and that's really more long-term than immediate, is the building of this digital ecosystem. Because what Lena said is right. Sometimes most of the cash transfer, whether it ends up in but once it ends up with people cashing out, then you still have a cash issue, because it's still, and you have liquidity problems at agent points, because suddenly if you are transferring large sums of money, then all these agent points in rural areas need to have a lot of cash to actually give out. And that's actually another big problem. So long term, I think there's a drive through digital skills education and stuff to try and build a digital ecosystem, which would mean that people can actually pay digitally. So they can actually use their digital money, whether it's a card or whether it's mobile money, to actually purchase ideas, so that they do not need to go and cash out. That takes some time to build. It's part of development, but that's sort of the vision and the drive, and certainly something that we are pushing from our side. Thank you.
Thanks. And Yosha?
Yeah, thanks. I think, or just two things to mention from my financial systems development perspective. I think the one, what Lena already said, it's this choice option on the beneficiary side. So I think it's really important that the beneficiary, the recipient, has the opportunity to decide how she wants to receive the money. I think this is really important. But the other aspect is interoperability. So if you have a system where you have interoperability between the different providers and interoperability between the different devices. So if you can cash out at the ATM, or if you can cash out at the agent and so on, and then you can as well just being interoperable between the providers, then from a financial systems development perspective, it's really okay to just have one provider, because this one provider can distribute to all different other providers and so on. And this is what we did, for example, in Jordan, where we partnered, this is on the humanitarian sectors, where we partnered with the World Food Programme as GIZ, and where we had a tender just to choose one provider for distributing the money, the cash assistance. But because the system was interoperable, the recipient was able to choose the one mobile wallet provider he wants to use, or he was able to choose the bank account where he wants to receive the money, or he was able to choose receiving the money at an ATM, not dependent on the provider for this ATM. So interoperability and choices were just the two things I wanted to mention.
Great, thanks. The time is already running up. We have 5 minutes left. I think the last question has brought a lot of further interesting aspects. Clearly, the key point is that a lot of these questions are context specific. And for me, a key point that also came out was that Ultimately, this should also be thought through from the point of the view of the beneficiary. I mean, if we take this idea of a rights-based approach to social protection serious, and we consider that individuals they don't receive the cash payment as charity or as a donation, but that they really have an entitlement to receive these benefits, then obviously we need to figure out a payment system that is accessible for everyone. And this, in certain countries, may mean that you're forced to operate with multiple providers, even if the procurement is difficult, simply because there may not be one provider that can deliver the benefit to the entire entitled population, or to all the beneficiaries. But again, this depends a lot on your operational environment and the ecosystem that you operate in. And something that both Rodrigo and William emphasized, it is important to build up the necessary infrastructure to be able to deliver this in any case. And then finally, this call for interoperability that will facilitate greatly whatever mechanism you opt for. I think these were really important points. Now, across the questions that we have been able to answer in this clinic, it is very difficult to draw key lessons, but I would nevertheless like to invite our resource persons to come up with one key message or take-home message, something that has come up during the discussion or something that hasn't come up yet, but that you think is of crucial importance for countries that are striving to build reliable payment systems for social protection schemes and programs. Rodrigo, do you want to go first with this?
Sure, I can start. I think the idea that we are building infrastructure, when I say infrastructure, it's not just the physical aspects of, antennas and connections, but data infrastructure for me is one of the most important elements, because that's what allows for the interoperability that was mentioned, that's what allows for facing the new problems that come up with different ways of organizing interaction within society. So I think data infrastructure is one of the most important elements in the beginning of the century. And when we work with this, we are building social infrastructure. And we have always to think that we have to go beyond our specific programs, because this data will be used somewhere and somehow. So we have to build it properly, basically. Thank you.
Thanks. Joscha, do you want to go next?
Okay, yeah, it's difficult, but I will make it short. I think the opportunities are there and they are great, but in the end, we have to ensure that no one is left behind. I think this is crucial, and we should really take a step back now or in the next month and to look what really has worked and what has not worked, and if the risks, and Rodrigo pointed to the data protection risk again, that we should really assess what happened with regard to the risks and what happened in general, and if we were able to really include each and every one.
Thanks for this recall to also draw the lessons from what we are currently going through and experiencing. Lena, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I think my take-home message would really be to keep the beneficiary and user perspective in mind. As we've seen, I think COVID and concurrent developments have really provided this boost, or this potential boost, to digital payments and digital technologies. And they certainly come with a lot of benefits, potential benefits for both implementing agencies and beneficiaries. But I think we need to be careful not to let considerations of efficiency and cost saving overshadow the beneficiary perspective. And as you said, that might mean that you have to contract with more than one payment provider, which might be more expensive. It might also mean that you have to offer additional financial education. It might mean that you have to rely on cash for certain regions or for a certain time until a mobile ecosystem or digital ecosystem is established. And I think that's probably my key take-home message, to keep that in mind and to not digitize just for the sake of it, and to see it as a silver bullet for everything.
Thanks a lot. And last but not least, William, kindly share a take-home message that you may.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the key thing for me again is also the focus on the beneficiaries or the customers, and the question still remains: how can we provide, a payment system that keeps their dignity or that maintains their dignity? How can we provide it? So for me, dignity is a key thing, and that will drive whatever technology solution we put out there, whatever process that we put out there for payments. And I would encourage that we all keep on focusing on that key issue. How can we provide them services with dignity? Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot. So thanks to all of you. Thanks for posting really interesting and great questions that gave us a great discussion. Please, there is a link to a short survey on this session that was posted in the chat. So we would really appreciate your feedback on whether you enjoyed this session. There's also a link in the chat to a Google document where all the questions that have been posted will be answered in writing throughout the day. You can also engage on that document and give additional examples, share your experience, and provide additional inputs to what's there. So this is not just for reading and absorbing information, but it's also your chance to share information that you may have and experiences that you think are worth exchanging. This conference is still continuing today and the next 2 days, so please check the agenda of the conference and see if there are other sessions that are interesting for you. In particular, there's also another session on digital solutions for social protection during COVID on outreach, registration, and enrollment. That may be interesting for you as well if you liked this session.
And
thanks.
another session of this one, 11 hours from now, we'll have another round for the payment session.
Indeed, there is also, and in case you didn't get enough of this, there's another payment session in 11 hours time. If you're still awake, some of you who are joining from Asia may not have a chance, but those in Europe or Africa, you may want to join again in 11 hours time. With this, we've come to an end for this session. Thanks in particular, of course, to our resource persons and their knowledgeable answers that they had for our questions. Immediately next, we have sessions on, wait a second, normally I should have a PowerPoint slide on this, but I don't. Anyway, so I mean, I guess you'll have to check the agenda for the sessions. No, coming up next. So immediately up next, if you want to get another hour's worth, there's one clinic that has the same format as this one, where you can ask questions and discussants or resource persons who will answer them on linking and transitioning between non-contributory and contributory social protection, specifically for informal workers, but also beyond that. We also have right now a roundtable on overcoming the food security and nutrition roadblocks in social protection responses to COVID-19. And then there's also the virtual booth talk from the Asian Development Bank. So these are immediately following our sessions. Thanks a lot and goodbye.